Video title appears, Cultivating a Culture of Inclusive Practices.
Currently in the US, it is common for students with disabilities to make up between 10 and 15% of the student population of a district. More than half of those students spend over 80% of their day in general education. So it's likely that every public school educator has served a student on an IEP in their classroom at least once. But even if a student doesn't have an IEP, it's estimated that 1 out of every 5 students has some type of learning disability, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed. In our video on the what and why of inclusive technology, we looked at several different ways that inclusive technologies can empower learners. So we know that there's a lot of stuff out there, but unfortunately these technologies have yet to be widely accepted and implemented in many districts, and particularly are often not fully supported for students with disabilities. Oftentimes, when the topic of providing students with additional technology in the classroom comes up, we hear things like, "That's cheating," or "It's a crutch," or "It's not fair." Or sometimes we'll hear judgments about the student's abilities before anyone even considers the use of technology. We'll hear, "He can't do it anyway," "She's too low functioning to be in this class." These types of comments show that many educators had not yet been given the opportunity to learn about how beneficial inclusive technologies can be. In teacher prep programs, educators are often provided only one class on supporting students with disabilities. And within those courses, it's rare to see training on how inclusive technologies can remove barriers to the learning experience. In order to shift practice, we must first provide opportunities for educators to develop an inclusive mindset. So what does it mean to have an inclusive mindset? Educators with an inclusive mindset embrace and respect the fact that everyone is unique, with different abilities, backgrounds, and learning preferences. An inclusive mindset is a prerequisite for practitioners to design inclusive learning experiences. For example, an IT technician who has been supporting the procurement of learning materials may not understand or even consider why accessibility of those materials matters until meeting a student with a visual difference who requires those materials to work with their assistive technology. Or perhaps a high school ELA teacher hears a department colleague with dyslexia and dysgraphia talk about some of the barriers he faced in high school. This colleague shares about how teachers made him read out loud and how it made him physically ill, and how a lack of options for showing his knowledge made it difficult for people to understand the level of his knowledge. Gaining these insights can often be enough to shift an educator's mindset around inclusive practices. But in a building, you may have one educator with an inclusive mindset and another educator who doesn't yet have that inclusive mindset. So students who enter these two classrooms are going to experience a vastly different learning experience. And the difference becomes an issue of equity. So the ultimate goal is to build an inclusive culture that extends beyond an individual's mindset and becomes just the way business is done. Culture is defined as the norms, values, beliefs, traditions, and rituals built up over time. An inclusive culture starts with a shared belief that students can learn at high levels. An inclusive culture values variability and uniqueness as a strength of the community. Over time, it is possible to build an inclusive mindset and cultivate an inclusive culture. For example, one district devoted the opening 15 minutes of every staff meeting across every building for an entire year to focusing on an inclusive culture. District leaders developed many lessons on learner variability and inclusive mindsets and share them with building leadership. One of the most impactful experiences was when a panel of staff members with various disabilities shared recollections of the barriers they experienced during their education. Then in the next session, they watched a video of students from across the district sharing their needs and preferences for learning experiences. By the end of that year, the culture had changed to the point where learning about inclusion was something that the staff actively wanted to do, and they were seeking out professional development on inclusive practices. Building a culture of inclusivity in your practice, school, or agency will have lasting results not just for students with disabilities, but for all learners. Each decision we make as educators will act as an example of how to build an inclusive culture in the future. On the site's website, we've provided a set of materials that will help you with strategies to both support individual mindset and to cultivate a culture of inclusion in your district. Be sure to check out the full video series, and remember, the future is inclusive.
Text appears. To learn more, visit sites.cas.org. The site's logo appears. Sites. Center on Inclusive Technology and Education Systems. The CAST logo. CAST, until learning has no limits. Special thanks to Wellesley Public Schools, Massachusetts; Jenks Public Schools, Oklahoma; Mount Vernon Community School District, Iowa; Tomball Independent School District, Texas. The logo for the U.S. Office of Special Education Programs, Ideas That Work. This content was developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education, grant number H327T1800001. However, the contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. Project Officer, Anita Vermeer, Master of Education. This video is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 International License, 2023.